Okay, we are live, folks. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. It is Wednesday, and we are midway through February here. Pleased to be joined once again by Major Jeffrey Prather, retired Army officer, ex-DEA special agent, former DIA intelligence officer turned whistleblower, and then targeted by the government. In addition to hosting his own call-in weekly talk radio show, The Prather Point, he is also a martial arts master, Apache wisdom teacher, Kinetic Quotient creator and trainer, firearms and horsemanship instructor, published author, Screen Actors Guild film actor, speaker, father, husband, and chaplain. And we spoke initially, I believe it was in October, mid-October or so. And I think you were at, we were just talking about 2,000 subscribers. And since then, in that relatively short period of time, although during 2020, kind of seemed like a week felt like a year in many instances, and I think that subjective experience has transferred to 2021. But Major Prather has since blown up as the young folks saying, upwards of like 80K now, I think, on YouTube. And yeah, really excited to chat with you again, Major Prather, and catch up on your past work and your current work and as current events too. So I'm going to welcome you to the show.
Nice to be back with you.
And we are streaming on my Facebooks, my YouTube. I'm not allowed to post videos on YouTube again on my second replacement channel. I've been terminated twice so far on there, as well as Club Osprey on YouTube, as well as Twitter, Periscope, which Periscope will be disappearing, I believe, at the end of March, and Twitch too. We usually get a handful of people on Twitch joining us as well. But I wanted to start actually, Major Prather, with your book that I'm reading. I mentioned before I'm about a day and a half behind because of some car trouble during this cold snap blizzard, whatever we want to call it. I resurrected my van, which I actually rode to middle school in, only to have it perish the following day. But I am deep into this book already. It's called Initiation, Boys Are Born, Men Are Trained. And it is about Jeffrey Prather's journey with an Apache medicine man. And in his own words, his journey on the path towards spiritual manhood. So I was hoping we could start with the book. And I really want to talk about your writing process for this because it's very well written. I think I underestimated you as a writer. I certainly think you're an above average writer, to say the least. I usually find a few mistakes when I'm reading, and I don't think I've found any so far in this book, and I'm more than halfway through it. But could you talk kind of motivation for writing this book? And then really I'm interested in your habits and the writing process. What was that like for writing Initiation?
Well, I remember a long time ago saying to you, you should read my book. And so you are a man of your word. I should say too, my radio show was canceled. So because they said I was racist, just funny because I was on a Black conservatives radio show, a Hispanic radio show. Of course, my Apache teacher was copper skinned and my Japanese martial arts teacher was Asian. So that's kind of funny. But I wrote the book when I was sentenced to New York, when the DEA was going after me. And I had been teaching since 1988. My Shiwoye, that's grandfather in Apache, was Philip Casador. I don't say his real name in the book, but since then I do now. So you can look up Philip Casador, ran for president, had lots of music out there. And he really reestablished traditional Apache culture, because a lot of people don't know, but in the United States of America, until 1978, Native American religion was banned. It was illegal. And so that's when I met him. They were still having their ceremonies in secret, but he really kept that connection going. And when the DEA came after me and moved me to New York, I really didn't have a lot to do. So I finally started writing the book. And the book is a true story. you can still, when I have students in 2 weeks, I'm teaching the empowerment intensive, which is the second cycle of initiation. And I have students come in from all over the world, and they can still go up to Steve's store, which is, in reality, it's Desert Sun, not Desert Soul, but he sells the book there, and he can tell you about Steve, and he can tell you about Philip. It was an amazing process. And, when I walked in there, he said, "Hey, I've been waiting on you. You're late." So he had seen or prophesized that I was coming and that I would train with him. And that was amazing. And I am writing the second book. I'm writing about 6 books, but it's not out there yet. But later on, after I left and I came back to Arizona as a young second lieutenant, and I was down at Fort Huachuca because that's where the military intelligence school is, and I was going through military intelligence officers basic course. I'm walking across the old parade field, and of course I'd stayed in touch with him by mail, but that was snail mail. And the parade field is vast, and was nothing scheduled, nothing coordinated. And in the distance across the parade field, I see this guy walking towards me, and it was him. And he walked right up to me on this vast Fort Huachuca compound, and I was just stunned again. So he just stunned me over and over with DEA. That's Inde, that's Apache for power, and medicine man is Yin, an empowered one, over and over with the connection. He had come down there to see me because a chief's son had died, and he wanted help with a funeral. But I just was flabbergasted. And he's like, "Well, we just got a couple of medicine men together, and we sung you to us." And that's a real old concept of singing. But I went through that, and I've taught that. And so writing it when I found the time was pretty easy, really.
Did you have a goal of like 1,000 words a day, or did you just write until over a period of time, or how did that?
You're a little broken. So I would. My other story of when DEA came after me, they moved me to New York from Tucson, and so I worked in Manhattan. I lived in White Plains. I rode a subway. I hated it because I'm a country boy. I got horses and everything. So I had really nothing there to do. I was away from my kids. So I just started writing, and I would write. I'd write on the train to and from. It just started pouring out of me. And it was easy because I had lived it. And I had, and I have taught it for so many years. I think this is my 33rd year of teaching it, and I'm teaching it again. And there are a couple folks across the country who are certified also to teach it. In fact, there's right there in Madison, there's one of my chaplains and initiation instructors that teaches it and has taught it regularly for years. But, it's not trying to make people into being Apache or make them into being Indian or Native American. It is showing what I say is American exceptionalism is based upon our exceptional love of life and freedom. And this is we'll fight, kill, and die for it. And when we'll even go to foreign countries and fight, kill, and die for it, and then we give the country back. And no one in the history of the world except us has ever done that. And the reason we do that is because of our ethics, and our ethics come from our morals, and our morals come from our spiritual base. And our spiritual base is Judeo-Christian. Everybody gets that piece because, the founders thought of themselves as the new Israelites. Benjamin Franklin wanted the seal of America to be Moses parting the Red Sea with the pillar of fire behind him. Thomas Jefferson signed his letters, "Yours in Christ." Washington lost many battles, but prayed for divine providence and won. But a lot of people miss the native piece, and that's really ethnocentric at best and racist at worst. But Chief Shenandoah relieved Washington at Valley Forge by bringing venison and corn. Benjamin Franklin got the idea. They really got the idea from the Iroquois Confederacy, which had existed for 600 or 700 years, and which our Confederacy of states actually destroyed, because the Confederacy actually took sides against each other for the first time. And the great Russell Means, who was an activist, and you could see him in Last of the Mohicans, said, I love American constitutional law because it's Indian law, and it's really the truth. And if you like our form of government, which we used to have, and if you like potatoes, and if you like corn, then you like Indian stuff, because all that stuff came from Native America. And without it, we would not exist. So to put that final piece, that final trinity together is extremely important. And it's important because you relate through the land you live on. So when I'm walking with pastors or something, I've had a Presbyterian pastor in a sweat lodge. He said, well, when I was growing up, I thought it was deviltry. Like, it's not deviltry. It's a way of weakening the physical to access the spiritual. But everybody's so much in their box. And I said to him, the way you fish in Alaska is not the way you fish in Hawaii, but you are both fishing. So the way you pray through the landscape in America, Native America, is best done through the people whose the first 6 feet of the soil is the dust and bones of their ancestors. Anyway, I'll shut up and let you say something.
No, that's great. That's great, Major Prather. And you mentioned you're writing several books. Can you tell us about any of those that you're writing on right now?
I'm writing a book about my training with my grandmaster in Japan, who is still around, but his wife passed on. And when she passed on, I sent a little blurb to Japan, and they loved it. I just haven't got there yet. And I'm writing a book on Yeshua, on how I see the Christ, and a horsemanship book as well. I got a horsemanship DVD coming out soon. That's finished. And those are all very different perspectives. The native perspective with horse is that horse originated here in America. And then the archaeologists say that it disappeared, but the elders do not say that. They say it was always here. The Ice Age came, but it did not cover the southeastern of the United States. So the horse still existed down in Florida, Georgia. So the Spanish did bring horses back. But 1622, I think, is the first Western record. I think it's a Franciscan monk who sees an Apache on horseback. And I think the Pilgrims are here in 1620. And there's also archaeological digs that show that there are horse bones, not when they should be. But the ethnocentric racist perspective of that is a caballero in Spanish is a gentleman, but a caballo is horse. So a horseman, a caballero, is a gentleman. And the reason they were horsemen is because they had land. If you think of European nobility, it's land. So if you come over here and you see towns and villages and cities and roads and fields, which were here, and copper mines and everything else, if you say that these people have horses and you say that these people have culture, then it's a lot harder to destroy a culture and demean them into non-human beings. So the myth, is there was nothing here. It was wilderness. There was no culture. There was no civilization, and there were no horses.
Right. And before we go into your Gulf War experience, and I want to tie that to the PLA, is pretty much a book on unrestricted warfare, which you have referenced several times in your broadcast, and I'm reading that as well. I just wanted to share an excerpt from that, and they talk about the immortal bird of warfare. And this is Qiao Liang and Wang Jiangsui, of the People's Liberation Army of China. I might be mispronouncing those, so forgive me for that. But the immortal bird of warfare will not be able to attain nirvana when it is on the verge of decline. When people begin to lean toward and rejoice in the reduced use of military force to resolve conflicts, war will be reborn in another form and in another arena, becoming an instrument of enormous power in the hands of all those who harbor intentions of controlling other countries or regions. Nothing has happened. He has only undergone a sea change. War, which has undergone the changes of modern technology and the market system, will be launched even more in atypical forms. In other words, while we are seeing a relative reduction in military violence, at the same time, we definitely are seeing an increase in political, economic, and technological violence. However, regardless of the form the violence takes, war is war, and a change in the external appearance does not keep any war from abiding by the principles of war. And that's on page 6 of Unrestricted Warfare. And as I said, I'm reading that. It was released in 1999. When did you first encounter this book, and how has it changed and molded your understanding of Asian philosophy and Chinese philosophy of modern warfare?
Well, kudos to you for doing your homework. Unrestricted Warfare is up on my Patreon for my patrons. I don't remember when I first encountered it, but I am a longtime intelligence officer, and I have long talked about how when we won the first Gulf War, and by the way, I volunteered and they didn't take me, and then I volunteered for 9/11 and they didn't take me. And then for the second Gulf War, I didn't volunteer and they took me. So that's how the military works is, they train you for jungle warfare. You end up in the Arctic. If you train you for urban warfare, you end up in the country. But regardless, what happened was these two Air Force, People's Liberation Army, PLA Air Force colonels watched us win. And we always watch each other fight. And we know that we have to win quickly because during the Tet Offensive, the unconventional warfare of the North Vietnamese guerrillas moved to conventional North Vietnamese regular troops, just like if you've seen We Were Soldiers Once and Young. That's the first encounter of the 101st with regular troops. But you always have to switch, and we've talked about this with George before, is you always find in the final stage, you go from UW, unconventional warfare, to conventional warfare. And so at the Tet Offensive, they switched, and they went all out at us, and we stopped them cold. But Walter Cronkite, this is the modern fake news. We were just talking about ancient fake news, which is it's a wilderness and there's no civilization here. But modern fake news, I say, really begins with Walter Cronkite at the Tet Offensive, where he says, "Oh, it was a terrible defeat," when it was in reality, it was a complete victory for us, and that we won every war we won every battle in Vietnam and lost the war. So, and that's psyops, and that's informational warfare, and that's vector information, and that's now what they call information influence operations. So we now know that we have to move very quickly before the propaganda press turns against us. So we won the first Gulf War so fast that these two Air Force colonels from China looked at it and said, "Hey, nobody can take the U.S. head on because there's nothing like the American warrior. The world's never seen, because of our value of freedom and life, there's nothing like us anywhere." And so that's, what I say at the beginning of our show is, hey, you ain't the Japanese, you ain't the Nazis, you're an ISIS, and we beat them all. And I know you like that because I've seen you repost that, and it's true. So they came up with this new kind of warfare, which is unrestricted warfare. And when we delineate things, we put it into fourth and fifth generational warfare. And fifth generational warfare is the combatants aren't in uniform. There's no flags. There's no flag patches. You can't identify their funding. You can't identify the combatants from the crowd, which is exactly what happened in Portland. And finally, on January 6th in the Capitol. All of that was staged. All of those were actors, all of them. And I've done deep dives on my show where I've taken various assassinations, and I've analyzed. And there's a couple other people. Not many people are doing it because not many people have a lot of experience in covert warfare. But there was a couple assassinations, the one in Portland and the one where the guy saying frack around and find out. And those were total setups. And the Ashley Babbitt murder was also a false flag event. So I'm not trying to get into the weeds about who was who. I'm just saying that those were all actors. It's all staged. And when you have a lot of people there, that is a deception, distraction operation going on. So the Chinese decided to come after us every way possible, economically, politically, through media. They helped fund the great Midway movie. They're all over Disney and Mulan. They are, and of course, they deeply infiltrated the Biden family, primarily through Hunter, by addicting him to drugs, by then luring him with child sex with Chinese kids, and then extorting him. And that's when the 3 hard drives came out from the new Federal Republic of China, showing this is what the Chinese do. And they really portrayed Hunter as a victim. And this is what they've done with Pelosi. This is what they've done with all of them. And so that's what we're undergoing now. And that's why it's so important to understand that this is not primarily a shooting war. The show I did yesterday was called The Human Terrain, because the first rule of battle is to know when you're in one. And the second is to understand the battlefield and understand the terrain of the battlefield. And primarily this terrain is human. And that means it's psychological and it's informational and emotional. And that gets into COVID-19 and the PSYOP. It's a bioweapon, but it's really a PSYOP. And it's worked fantastic. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was great, Major Prather. And unrestricted warfare, related to that, what is your understanding of weather warfare, if at all? I'm very curious because I haven't done a whole lot of reading on this, and I've heard people talk about it.
You know, I am convinced you're really sharp. I got to compliment you, because I'm convinced that we've been under weather warfare attack here in Arizona. We have never had the dry seasons that we've had. And I'm very, I got my teepee out there. I got my horses out here. I'm always up in the mountains. I've lived a lot of my life outside, and we've never seen weather like this. It is not normal. I am convinced that there is a HARP or weather weapons. When the fires were happening on the West Coast, there were Antifa guys dressing up in fire uniforms and planting those. And there was also some, I thought, pretty good evidence of energy weapons coming either from satellite or from ships. But I am also convinced that there is some other HARP or weather weaponry being activated. And it may be on both sides, because China's experienced incredible flooding as well. And then we've seen the more cruder attempts in Florida, the poisoning of the water supply. And that was because it's where Trump is, and that's where there's a lot of supporters at. And we're seeing this weather in Texas. I don't think any of those are coincidences, but I don't have a good handle yet on that. But I am convinced through noetics and through my intuition that that is under attack. And in traditional cultures, one thing I'm going to teach in 2 weeks is how traditional people were able to pray for rain. Typically that's called a rain dance, but really it is connecting to, what you need. So I think there's really something to that. Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
You there? Did I lose you?
Oops, sorry about that. Lost you for a second. The reason I was asking is because this cold snap is quite. It seems to me to be an anomaly of sorts. Not in the Midwest, but particularly down south. And you mentioned the 6th, and we won't go too much into the weeds on the 6th. But I just wanted to ask about these FBI visits that seem to have mostly stopped, but really were right after that event. And I found out through some sources here that they are going out into like very rural spots in Wisconsin as well, and visiting visiting people, which I didn't think was the case, simply for being there, being present there on the 6th. Yeah, what do you think the motivation behind that is?
Well, of course, I was in 1811. I was a special agent with the DEA. I went to the FBI Academy because there wasn't a DEA Academy back then. I am personal friends with Ed Morales, who's the hero of the Miami FBI gunfight. If there's anybody as a firearms instructor knows about the Miami gunfight. So having said all that, the FBI today is a wreck. It is really just the cleanup team for the deep state, usually the CIA covert operations. Notwithstanding, accepting the 2 heroic agents, I think it was Alvin and another female agent that lost their life in Florida, investigating child crimes and also investigating Hunter. And I think they were set up. I think that very similar to what happened to Brian Terry in my day, how I went from hero to zero, where he was set up, the FBI. I think most people know the ATF was running the guns. I think some people know my side of that. The DEA was letting the Sinaloa cartel run drugs, but I think a lot of people still don't know that the FBI was running the hit team. And I think that that probably also happened in Florida with those 2 heroic agents. But as an agency, they're pretty much done, just like the CIA. I liken it to it's CIA black hat against DIA white hat to kind of generalize, not totally true, but generalization, and U.S. Marshals white hat against FBI black hat, because the U.S. Marshals have done a lot of child rescue, and I got to help them out with some of their stuff in Portland and other places, got them turned on to anti-laser goggles because they were getting blinded. I think 3 agents got blinded. And so they didn't know about the goggles. So that was my little contribution there. But it's real sad. And they will eventually understand how they have been betrayed and they have become irrelevant. And that will not work out for them in the end. If you're no longer a warrior protector, then you are irrelevant.
And you mentioned the Florida situation. I hadn't really backed it up, but my intuition was that it seemed like a setup to me, just because you don't hear about those sorts of situations that often. Do you think it was my impression that maybe these agents were good people, good men and women, and squares really is what maybe the upper brass might see them as, and a way to get rid of them? And you said they were. I think they were investigating a sex offender. Is that correct? I don't know if you can add more details to that.
Yeah, they were investigating child criminals. And I think it was Alvin, if I got his name right. And I think he was also working on the Hunter Biden hard drives, which had child crimes on them as well, just like Weiner's laptop did, and just like Hillary's laptop did. And you haven't heard of FBI. A lot of people don't know, because they think the FBI, there's FBI. I've known FBI agents who have gone through their entire 20-year career and never cuffed anybody. They are not in the space. They are not, they're kind of white collar office guys. And again, I've known some great ones, but for the most part, like I said, Ed Morales, wounded in the arm and learns how to one-hand a shotgun in the middle of the gunfight. Fabulous hero. But for the most part, you don't see FBI agents getting shot anymore, except when they shoot themselves on dance floors, flipping backwards or supposedly suiciding themselves. But that guy was doing financial investigations. And there was another FBI that was, I think, suicided himself, who was working, I think, Hillary's laptop quite a while back. So the deep state has really corrupted and been corrupted. Basically, it's domestic traitors who have been corrupted by foreign enemies, which is mainly China and Iran. For example, The FBI arrested Lieber about a year ago at Harvard. He was going to Wuhan. Nobody connects that, but he was the one bringing the coronavirus over, the bioweapon over. The FBI arrested him. But a lot of people don't know that 2 days after the arrest, he was out on bail. And of course, Epstein also had a university chair at Harvard. And to be fair, the FBI has probably arrested about 50 or 60 foreign scientists who have infiltrated our biotech space. But, the charges aren't real serious. Lieber was arrested for false statements, not for espionage. And that's really one division of the FBI is foreign counterintelligence. It used to be following the Russians around. It should be following the Chinese around, but they're not really doing it. They're really eyes on us, not on the enemy.
Right. And that's interesting. They have a foreign counterintelligence contingent, even though they're more so domestic security, right? That would, generally speaking, fall to the CIA, but they have an arm or a branch for that regardless.
Well, so we have foreigners like the Soviets and the Chinese come in, and the FCI contingent typically would follow these diplomats around because diplomatic cover is how you do official cover for spies. That's what that means. And if you ever remember watching the old Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, he was after the knock list, and the knock list is non-official cover. That is guys who aren't in the embassy. But it's pretty easy for intelligence personnel. You just look at the embassy, you start watching the guy, and you follow him around. And the reason for official cover is because if you get caught, then you just get sent home because you've got diplomatic immunity. If you're a non-official cover, that's scary because you got no diplomatic immunity. And that's a whole nother can of worms. That's a lot of times journalists, but CIA has gone to, Anderson Cooper. The only place he worked before CNN was CIA. So, really, he's a knock used against us domestically by the deep state.
And a great example of that official cover is the Harry Dunn death over in Britain. I can't remember the spook's name. It was a woman, but it basically ran him over. I'm sure you're aware of that situation.
Yeah, vaguely. But yeah, that's typically how all that works. But what happened when Obama comes in, he fires 200, 250 field grade officers and also in intelligence and in federal law enforcement, replaces them with SES, senior executive service people. And that's why you had to see Trump keep firing people, because he just had to keep clearing out. And, we were all hoping that Barr, who had been CIA, was no longer, and that he was actually going to do something, and that Durham was actually going to do something, although Barr defended Waco and Ruby Ridge. I knew the FBI HRT sniper at Ruby Ridge, Lon Horiuchi, and I was at firearms instructor school at FBI when Waco was burning. And, from my Native heritage background, I've seen a lot of, Native women and children murdered and slaughtered. And I said, those Native, I don't know what the exact details are, but I know those innocents should not be being burned alive. But, I was like the lone guy in my class of 25 or 30 that thought that. And then after that, the FBI bulldozed the remains of the crime scene, which should be kept for chain of custody, into the fire, which destroyed the chain of custody. So this is not a new thing that's going on now, but it is worse than it's ever been. But on the other hand, they don't have cover anymore. We know what they're doing, and we're onto it.
What do you anticipate with, because I think you would agree that there was a successful soft coup on the 6th, and we're all, as you said, kind of hoping for Barr to step to the plate, and it seems like he just really twisted the knife right into Trump. Do you have what do you expect with this Biden administration? I mean, do you think Kamala Harris is going to take the reins by the end of the year, or what do you maybe foresee playing out?
Yeah, I would think that Kamala Harris, with her Chinese connections, will take the reins. Either Biden will die, be suicided or whatever, or he will, more of the Hunter stuff will come out and he'll say, well, I got to resign and I got to stand up for my son. Regardless, though, they are finger puppets for the deep state, which are in thrall to China. And that's what's happening. And we're seeing that constantly. There's no leaks on the 2-hour phone call with China. He just said the other night, I think, minorities don't know how to use the internet, and we got to have vaccinators to vaccinate. And he was vaccinated while Trump was in office. I mean, he is totally lost. But but I just did a show yesterday on this, and in 5th generational warfare, the terrain is primarily human, and they do not hold the terrain. They cheated in the election. January 6th was a false flag, but there's no big celebrations of the first female vice president. There's no big 81 million parades of Biden. Trump had 900,000 views on President's Day. Biden had 47,000, and that's probably all government workers. So they do not hold the terrain. And if you are going to do something in 5th generational warfare, you have got to hold the terrain. The primary way they're holding the terrain is through fear, which is COVID, which is a bioweapon, but it's primarily a psyop weapon. It's just to control you. The mask is a metric of how well you are controlled. But that's just not going to last. They certainly do control the coasts. They control the headquarters of deep state, which is DC, but they do not hold the rest of the country. And I don't see how they are going to hold the rest of the country. So in that instance, they are losing. In that, if you look at it from a 5th generational warfare point of view, the National Guard troops that are still in parking garages, in DC, and are still there, they're locked in. We're not locked out.
Right. And you actually, made the point about my next question as masks as a metric of control. We're seeing now the recommendation for 2 masks. And I've actually seen a couple of people wear 2 masks in public at the airport, and then, just a couple other spots as well. What other big metrics of control do you see? Because it does seem like they're seeing what the reaction will be with 2, maybe 3 masks. Do you think it'll go to 3 masks, or how will that develop?
Yeah, I think that they kind of were giddy with their success of how doped, dumbed down, and drugged up and fattened up the sheep were. And they're like, oh, let's do 2 masks. And the absurdity of it. Biden just said last night to a little girl, hey, kids don't get COVID, which I've been saying forever. But of course, the schools are closed. Well, why are the schools closed if the kids don't get it and they don't transmit it? And they are going to get sloppy because they can't keep all their lies straight, first of all. And second of all, they're not that smart. They're just devious. And that's why Judeo-Christian and natives are still around, because everybody's always trying to wipe out the Jews, Christians, and natives, but they can't because they have the connection to God and the truth. And the truth always makes sense. And the lies upon lies upon lies just get more confused. So I think they'll push it as long as they can. And the real reason is economic battle to destroy the small engine of America. The small business engine is what makes America run. So this is big business, big tech, big pharma, big gov, big media trying to destroy the small engine. But just like big news, everybody's ignoring, MSNBC is CNN, is Fox, is Newsmax, and the alternative is guys like you. And so as Americans, we're stepping in there like, well, we don't need them. They need us. We'll put the truth out there. And the same thing will happen with every instance. We have never been attacked. We were attacked by the Japanese, probably the best warriors in the world. We were attacked by the Germans, probably the best soldiers in the world, arguably. But we have never been attacked from within and from without simultaneously. But on the other hand, no one has ever attacked America like this either. And I remain hopeful that we will win and they will lose. But it's not going to be fun and it's not going to be easy. And, the people who are saying like, hey, Trump's really the president and Q's really still there and the military got this, that's not it. You said that the report, Unrestricted Warfare report, came out in 1999. Obama came into office over a decade ago. He was community organizing before that. That's at least how long this is going to take to change that process. So I'm talking 10 to 20 years.
Wow. Well, as you said, it may not seem like it's going to be fun, and I don't think it will be. But that's quite the statement there, Major Prather, and you're probably right about that. It would take at least as long to solve the problem as it did to create it, in a sense. Now, I want to switch gears a bit. Do you meditate of some sort on a daily practice? I know you go into meditative practices in your initiation process, which you talk about in your book. But what about now? Has that evolved in any way, or?
Yeah, sure. So I started practicing meditation at the age of 10 when I went into Japanese martial arts dojo, and that's called Zazen. And that's the original Buddhism, because I don't know if you know, but Bodhidharma or Daruma brought Buddhism from India to China, and he also brought martial arts. So he's often considered, so meditation, not the worship of Buddha, but the practice of meditation, which is just clearing the mind, emptying the mind, going to non-thought, mushin in Japanese, is really important. And so, yeah, I certainly do that. We do that before every dojo class, at the end of every dojo class. We do that at the beginning of an HMAC class. We do that certainly for 5 minutes at the beginning of every chaplaincy service. And, one thing that's happened with Christianity is it's become this professor lecture kind of thing. And it was not that. It was master disciple, just like Mr. Miyagi. Daniel-san, I agree. You teach you karate. You agree to learn. Oh, yeah. Okay, now go wash all the cars. Wait a minute. So you didn't want to put in the hard work. Nobody wants to put in the hard work. And the most important hard work is inner technology. And so the inner technology is getting rid of distraction. So that's what you're seeing in initiation, a lot of inner technology. That's what you see in Zen Buddhism, in martial arts. And that is really important. And if you go into a conventional church, I talk to people all the time, like, I don't like church. I'm like, I get it, because there's no active listening there. And so there's nothing that ever happens. It's all talking, singing, reciting, and it's all history. And I work with pastors all the time. And I even am a chaplain to a rabbi in Jerusalem. And people are amazed that we have all these experiences, like you're reading in the book, Initiation. There's lots of spiritual experiences because we fast and pray. This is the day of Lent today. So this is the day when you start fasting and praying. The Catholics and a couple other people put a little ash cross on your forehead. Well, that's what's left of with Apache Gan, mountain spirit dancers, when they're dancing for the little girl who has her first moon and she has special powers and to heal and bless. And she's called Islande Lehe, the white painted lady. And they cover themselves in charcoal. Well, you cover yourselves in charcoal because charcoal is a purifier. If you want to purify water, you run it through charcoal. And that is that's an alchemic transformation process from wood through fire to charcoal. And so when you cover your body in charcoal, you're getting rid of impurities. What's left of that is this little symbolic ash cross on your forehead, which doesn't really, I guess it's a mnemonic aid, but it doesn't really do much. But if you go back to, people look at native ceremonies as primitive, but they're actually much more sophisticated because they're kinetically doing stuff. When I've been around lots of mountain spirit dancers for decades. When you cover yourself in charcoal and when you put on the black mask to become anonymous, to have the great Holy Spirit flow through you, then things can begin to happen. And so that's the big difference. And where you start is with meditation. And meditation, the simplest way is shikantaza, which is just sitting, which is just watching your breathing, slowing your heart, slowing your breathing. and becoming quiet. And, that's the Torah quote is, be still and know that I am God. You there?
Got Major Prather?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're a little frozen on your image, but I hear you.
Connection. You've come up with this idea of KQ, is that right? Kinetic quotient. Could you explain that?
Yeah, kinetic quotient. I actually patented that because I came up with it. I was working with a serial entrepreneur. He's a multimillionaire because I do competitive intelligence. And it used to be IQ, which is your intelligent quotient, which is how smart you are. And then it became the EQ, which is your emotional quotient, which, how sweet and nice you are. And it's really not about how smart you are. And it's really not about how nice you are. It's what you can do, what you can get done. And that's what warriorship is all about. I have Warrior School too, another one of my companies. And the kinetic quotient is what you can accomplish. And you don't even have to know lots of times what you're doing as long as you are moving forward. And so that's basically what KQ or the kinetic quotient is. Got a website up on that. Really don't have time to teach that except as through if I'm teaching natural horsemanship or native horsemanship or firearms or martial arts or the chaplaincy or initiation. Those are all kinetic. So if you come out to train with me, and I'd love to have you, or if you look at any of my DVDs, you'll see that everything is a deep dive. Nothing is superficial. Like with the horse is you do a hook on with the horse. And there's a whole process for that so that there is a non-physical spiritual connection. In the initiation book, Learning to See, that is the Holy Spirit. That's what they talk about, whether it's the baptism or at Pentecost. But those are all deep dives. And so the kinetic quotient is activating inner technology tools. And typically in the West, native peoples call Western first world peoples fire people because they use fire. They use electricity, where third world or indigenous people are earth people, and they are connected to the earth. And so what they refine is themselves as opposed to external stuff. And so we tend to judge cultures by how good everything is. But a telescope or a microscope is not nearly as sophisticated as we are. And so when I'm teaching initiation or martial arts or KQ or anything, it's refining us. And we can refine much more because we're of the Creator's creation. The Creator's creation is always more sophisticated than the Creator's creation's creation.
Wow, that's really profound stuff there, Major Prather. And I would, I'd love to come out there in Arizona. I've actually never been down there, and I definitely gonna plan on doing that at some point this year. And I just want to go back to books before we talk about your future work that you're doing and what you're doing right now. Do you have any book recommendations, maybe the past year or so that you've read that really stuck out to you, or it could be articles, anything that you've read that really you highly recommend to people, even rereads too from long ago?
Oh gosh, people send me books all the time. I can't even keep up with them all. And I do a lot of reading. So the Victor Alexander Aramaic Scriptures, which is Yeshua, Jesus, spoke Aramaic. And so going from Aramaic to English is the most important, because when you go from Aramaic to Hebrew to Greek to Latin to English, a copy of a copy of a copy gets worse. That's why if I'm teaching, I'll say things like naies, which is really in Inde, in Apache, that means now it is happening, but it gets translated as the sunrise ceremony or the changing ceremony. Or I'll say mushin, which is no mind, or ku, which is void, which is really void is the space, the space in between, the relation in between. Where in the West we think about 1, 2, but we're talking about what the relation of the space is in between. Yeshua talks about that too, and he says, when 2 or more are gathered, I am there. Why? Because there's a connection happening in between. It's not a spell, it's how things work. If you're with one horse, then there's a connection. That's why marriage is the highest and most sacred sacrament between 2 opposites, male and female. So that's the first one. The Aramaic scriptures, the Didache, which is the training manual of how to become a Christian, which didn't make the cut because it was found late. But it's not a big tome. It's small, but it starts off saying there are 2 ways, the way of death and the way of life, and they are vastly different. And that's, you'll hear me say it at the beginning of my show, is you got to choose one: death and slavery or life and freedom. And then if you want to go,
we are chosen, so we must choose.
There you go. That's right. Before we are formed in the womb, God knew us. I'll cry. That's so important. And so we fight, kill, and die out of love. They kill out of hate. And that is the difference. Yesterday was the anniversary. I am so proud to know a special forces guy named Chad Ball once, who was dropped behind enemy lines. It's kind of like Bravo 20, if you know that movie.
I haven't seen it yet.
And he was behind enemy lines in the first Gulf War, and some little Iraqi kids were walking up, and behind them was the dad, the sheep herder, and behind them was an Iraqi armored column. And there's no hope of getting out. And they said, hey, they had suppressors. Most people call them silencers, but they're called suppressors. And they're like, hey, what should we do? Bulldog. That was his handle, Bulldog. And he says, well, we're not going to kill the kids. The motto of special forces is de oppresso liberis, liberate the oppressed. We're going to fight this out. So the kids see him, they run off, tell the shepherd tells the armored column, they get into a tremendous fight. But because they are so highly trained, they drop about 40 of the bad guys, and then they hold out, and then eventually they get rescued. Nobody even gets shot from their team. Bravo 20 is a similar thing that happened with the Special Air Service. It's pretty famous, but a lot of them got shot and captured. But sticking with life and freedom, with truth through our Judeo-Christian native values is the core to winning. And in the end, the most committed wins, and the most committed always have a transcendent value system. It is not about ourselves. It is about our relation in the circle. I can't be a warrior if I have no one to protect. I'm just like Miyamoto Musashi, who wrote Gorin no Sho, Book of Five Rings. My teacher in Japan, a genius, said he's a great killer, he's a great swordsman, but he was not a warrior protector. He had nobody to protect. And so I got a great story if you want to hear it about that.
Please.
So I'm a senior Daishihan in the Bujinkan. And so when he would come over, he came twice to Tucson, and when he went to other cities, about 500-600 practitioners from all over the world. And so we help each other out. We kind of run things, and I was taking care of the VIPs at somebody's Taikai. And so we went into a break room to have a little tea, and some 10th Dan judokas like telling him about this guy who stopped Miyamoto Musashi from fighting because he held up his hoe, and he said, he held his hoe in such a great way that he couldn't defeat him. And usually Hatsumi Sensei will just say, oh, yes, very good, because I've stayed in his house and I've heard all kinds of crazy people come around, and they're like, hey, I'm from Mars, and I've combined ninjutsu with Martian, and it's called Martian ninjutsu. And usually Sensei will go, oh, very, very good, keep going. And they'll just let him go off on their crazy path. But on this occasion, he went, no, that's not right. And we all kind of perked up because he never says that. He just lets people go off on their tangents. And he goes, no, it wasn't because the guy was so good with the hoe. It was because the guy had a little plot of land that fed his family, and he would kill and die for his family. And Musashi didn't have that. And that's what made him invincible. And that's what will make us win in the end.
Wow, you made me think of a conversation I had with a close relative of mine about that, and having something to fight for. And you mentioned like the space in between things too. It reminds me of I think it was a Beethoven quote. He talks about how music is made by the spaces between the notes and not the notes themselves.
Yeah, that's like Michelangelo saying the figure was already in the marble. I just freed it.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. Wow, we got about 5 minutes left here, Major Prather. What are you working on now, and what should people be looking for from you in the near future?
Well, the dojo's still going. It's small now, but there's the Unstoppables are still there. HMAC is still going. Horsemanship. I got a horsemanship, natural native horsemanship DVD coming out talking about the sacred relation between man and horse. The chaplaincy's going strong, and anybody can come into that just at christchaplaincy.com. But right now on my show and on Patreon, I am trying to teach people that they have to have an alternative to pop culture. And I have been trying to teach people that forever, because pop culture is so destructive, and it's never been as destructive as it is now. It is destroying families. It is destroying, people are dying in hospitals without their loved ones. People won't talk to family members because of Biden and Trump. Churches are not standing up for people. So an alternative institution. So I'm all about that, is Christ Chaplaincy, alternative chaplaincy. Just call in. Initiation is the native piece of coming to manhood, because the real crisis is that we don't train our children for adulthood anymore. And that's why you get these, what was that show? Friends. They were 30 or 40 something year olds acting like brats, because no one ever took them at puberty, separated them and trained them and said, hey, now this is going to be the hardest thing. You're going to be a mother, a father, a son, a daughter. You're going to take on responsibilities. You might get married at 15 or 16. There's kids in my dojo and in my chaplaincy that are 15 or 16 and even younger that are so mature. People comment when they hear from them because they are being challenged with responsibilities. So I'm trying now to show people through my podcast and through my Patreon how they can neighbor up, team up, and train up to be alternatives for pop culture, which is simply going to destroy them and everything. And I've trained tens of thousands, literally, and I've seen a lot of people fall over the years, and I'm still seeing them fall. And a lot of times they won't talk to me because I'll tell them the truth, and I will be ruthlessly truthful. And they don't want to hear the truth, because the truth means you have to change yourself. And I tell my kids in my dojo class, who are my most important students, the only thing you can change is yourself. But once you change yourself, everyone will change around you because of the relationship in between. And that's where it all starts. And that's how we're going to restore our republic. It's not Q, it's not Trump, it's not the military, it's not, some kind of secret. There's no easy answers. There's no fast track. This is what the native peoples had here when the original traders came over, and I've read their journals. They said, these guys don't want anything we have, because Creator has provided everything they need. And slowly they changed that. And so now we think we need drugs, and and I'm not against penicillin and electricity, but I'm just saying we don't need all the crap. We need interdependence on each other and God. But we need independence from the deep state and from pop culture. And that's what I'm trying to get out there. And I'm starting to, when I say Team America, that's not a slogan. That is a real team. And that is, you've probably heard me say it because you're sharp and you pay attention. I say we've got millionaires and we've got poor. We've got cops and we've got CEOs. And everybody is on that team, and everybody brings something and can help each other out. And that's what we need to return to.
Wow, excellent note to end on there, Major Prather. And I want to thank you again for joining me today. I always learn a lot when I speak with you, and I would love to have you on again, maybe for an Epstein Files episode. I'm sure we can muster up at least a half an hour episode talking about Mr. Epstein there sometime in the future. But if anybody wants to sponsor Major Prather, the links are in the description box, as well as his website, where you can find all of his podcasts, books, videos, and DVDs as well. And likewise with my own links for subscriptions and sponsorships and other channels also in the description box below. Major Prather, thank you so much for joining me. This is available not only on YouTube, but Facebook, Twitter, as I mentioned, Periscope, Twitch, and iTunes, as well as a variety of other podcast hosting services on the One Mind, One World podcast hosted by Addy Ads. I'm a public intelligence analyst, interviewer, and writer from the Midwest. And thank you so much again, Major Prather. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see everybody next time. Stay frosty, folks. It's dark winter, and we're gonna make through this, and we're gonna win, as Major Prather said. So thank you, everybody.